March 3rd, 2:47 a.m. local time, 1,200 feet beneath the Zagros Mountains. Iranian military personnel inside the Natanz underground missile complex hear something they've been trained to believe is impossible. A sound high above them, getting closer. The engineers who designed this facility in 2019 promised it could withstand anything short of a nuclear strike. 40 feet of reinforced concrete, steel-lined tunnels, blast doors rated for 5,000 pounds per square inch overpressure. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard invested 6 years and an estimated $2.3 billion into this single location alone, carving out a subterranean fortress that stretches across 4.7 square kilometers. On paper, it was untouchable. The sound gets louder. Then the ceiling starts to crack. What happened next has rewritten the rules of modern warfare, and the numbers coming out of Iran tell a story that military strategists will study for decades. Over 3,000 precision strikes across Iranian territory in just 9 days, 43 naval assets destroyed or disabled, an 83% reduction in drone launch capability. But those numbers, as staggering as they are, don't capture the real story. The real story is what's happening underground right now, where Iran's most expensive bet on deterrence has become the single greatest vulnerability in its entire military architecture. Because here's what nobody saw coming, including Iran's top military minds. The Americans didn't just find a way to destroy these bunkers. They found a way to turn Iran's own strategy against itself in a cascading failure so complete, so mathematically elegant in its devastation, that it's essentially locked Iran's most powerful weapons in underground tombs with no way out. We're not talking about damage. We're talking about systematic burial. And it all traces back to one decision Iran made 15 years ago that seemed brilliant at the time, but has now revealed itself as a fatal miscalculation. Admiral Brad Cooper, head of U.S. Central Command, laid out the scale of what's happening in a briefing that went largely unnoticed by mainstream media on March 5th. His words were clinical, almost casual, which made them more chilling. In the last hour, 2 U.S. bombers dropped dozens of 2,000-pound penetrator bombs targeting deeply buried ballistic missile launchers. Cooper stated, then he added the part that should make anyone who studies military strategy sit up straight. The president gave us another task level, Iran's ballistic missile industrial base. We're not just hitting what they have, we're destroying their ability to rebuild. This is the systematic destruction of an entire military doctrine. Read that again. An entire military doctrine, not a campaign, not infrastructure, a doctrine, meaning the fundamental way Iran has structured its defense strategy for the past decade and a half is being erased in real time. Let me put this in perspective. As of March 1st, the Israeli Defense Forces estimated Iran possessed approximately 2,500 ballistic missiles in various stages of readiness. These weren't crude rockets. We're talking about medium-range ballistic missiles like the K-Bar Sheikhan with a 900-mile range, the Ghajar H that can reach 1,200 miles, and the EMAD, which features terminal guidance systems sophisticated enough to adjust trajectory mid-flight. Iran spent decades and an estimated $40 billion building not just the missiles, but an entire underground network to store, maintain, and launch them. Hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, climate-controlled storage facilities, redundant power systems, hardened launch sites that could theoretically put a missile in the air in under 8 minutes. That was the theory. The reality playing out right now is very different. The weapon doing most of the damage is something you've probably never heard of unless you're deep in defense circles. The BLU-109 warhead, usually mated to a GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack Munition Guidance Kit. On paper, it sounds almost mundane, a 2,000-pound bomb with a hardened steel alloy casing. But understanding what this weapon actually does requires understanding how it fails in the most spectacular way possible for its targets. Dr. Rebecca Hastings, former lead engineer at the Air Force Research Laboratory's Munitions Directorate, explained it to me like this when I interviewed her for a previous project. People think bunker busters work by brute force penetration. That's partially true, but the real magic is in the timing. The BLU-109 is designed to penetrate, delay, then detonate at the exact moment when it's created maximum structural compromise. What does that mean in practice? The bomb doesn't explode on impact. It punches through layers of earth and concrete, its hardened casing allowing it to maintain structural integrity even as it's subjected to deceleration forces that would tear apart conventional munitions. Then, once it's deep inside the target, a time-delayed fuse triggers the 535-pound Tritonal warhead. The explosion itself is catastrophic enough, creating overpressure waves that turn the bunker's own structural reinforcements into shrapnel. But the real damage comes from what happens next. The blast creates what engineers call a structural failure cascade. Support pillars crack, ceiling sections lose integrity, and in underground facilities, unlike surface structures, there's nowhere for the pressure to escape. It reflects, amplifies, travels through tunnels, and compromises sections of the facility hundreds of meters away from the initial impact point. We've seen this weapon work before, and the results were apocalyptic. On February 7th, 2025, Israeli forces used a GBU-31 equipped with a BLU-109 warhead to kill Hassan Nasrallah, then leader of Hezbollah, in an underground bunker in Beirut's southern suburbs. The target was buried beneath multiple layers of civilian buildings. Israeli intelligence confirmed Nasrallah was meeting with senior commanders in what Hezbollah believed was a secure location. One bomb penetrated through 60 feet of mixed concrete and earth, detonated precisely inside the bunker. Nasrallah and at least 6 senior officials were killed instantly. Here's the part that should terrify anyone relying on underground protection. Video footage from street level, shared by the OSINT Defender X account, showed civilians walking on the street above surviving with minor injuries. The bomb's penetration was so precise, so controlled, that it delivered its payload exactly where it needed to go and nowhere else. That was one bunker, one bomb, one target. Now scale that up by a factor of thousands, and you start to understand what's happening in Iran right now. But here's where it gets interesting, and where Iran's fatal miscalculation starts to become apparent. The BLU-109, despite its effectiveness, is actually powerful enough to destroy these massive underground missile complexes in a single strike. It can't vaporize a facility that's 1,200 feet underground with 40-foot concrete ceilings. And the Americans know this, so they're not trying to destroy the bunkers themselves. They're doing something far more insidious. They're sealing them shut. Think about the architecture of an underground missile facility. You've got the main storage chambers. Yes, but those chambers are useless without access points. Tunnel entrances, ventilation shafts, elevator systems to bring missiles to surface-level launch positions, personnel access routes. Every one of these represents a structural choke point, and every single one is vastly more vulnerable than the main facility. A 2,000-pound penetrator doesn't need to destroy a tunnel, it just needs to collapse it. And once you collapse the tunnel, everything behind it becomes a tomb. Satellite imagery published by the New York Times on March 3rd tells the story with brutal clarity. In Isfahan, a major missile production and storage site photographed on February 28th showed intact surface structures and clear access routes. By March 3rd, the entire facility had been reduced to rubble and crater fields. In Kangavar, western Iran, before and after images show a tunnel entrance on March 1st, then the same location on March 2nd with the entrance completely caved in, buried under an estimated 40,000 tons of displaced earth and shattered concrete. In Kermanshah, surface buildings that housed ventilation and power systems were flattened by March 2nd, and a telltale crater sits directly over what satellite analysis confirms was the primary access tunnel. You don't need to be a military analyst to understand what happened there. The tunnel is gone, and everything inside it is now trapped. This is the domino effect in action. One collapsed tunnel doesn't just block one exit, it creates a cascading series of failures. Power systems lose redundancy, ventilation becomes compromised, personnel can't rotate in and out, missiles can't be moved to launch positions, and most critically, even if some of these facilities still have functioning missiles and working launch systems, they can't get the missiles out. The launchers are entombed alongside their operators. Colonel Sam Lyer, research associate at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, framed it perfectly in comments to the Wall Street Journal. What was once mobile and difficult to find is no longer mobile and easier to hit. This might be the single most important sentence written about this conflict so far, because it exposes the fundamental flaw in Iran's entire strategic approach. For decades, Iran's missile program relied on mobility, TEL's transporter-erector launchers that could move quickly, fire from unpredictable locations, then relocate before counterstrikes arrived. This is missile warfare 101. You stay mobile, you stay alive. But somewhere around 2010, Iran made a different calculation. They looked at the increasing sophistication of American and Israeli surveillance capabilities, and they made a bet. Instead of trying to hide mobile launchers from satellites and drones, they would go underground, build massive hardened facilities, concentrate their missile forces in locations that could theoretically withstand sustained bombardment. The logic seems sound. Satellites can track mobile launchers, but they can't destroy what's under a mountain. Except they can, because Iran forgot the most basic rule of fortifications. A fortress is only useful if you can get in and out of it, and more importantly, if you concentrate all your forces in fixed locations. You're not creating security. You're creating a target list. And that's exactly what happened. US and Israeli intelligence didn't need to work hard to find these facilities. Iran essentially told them where they were. You can't hide the construction of massive access roads leading to sparse mountain locations. You can't conceal the electromagnetic signatures of power generation facilities needed to run underground complexes. You can't prevent satellites from tracking the movement of specialized trucks and equipment to and from these sites. Iran's IRGC even released propaganda videos in March 2024, giving virtual tours of their impregnable underground missile cities, showcasing the Khaybar Sheikhan and Ghadar H missiles tucked away in climate-controlled tunnels. The Foundation for Defense of Democracies analyzed these videos at the time, and their conclusion was prophetic Iran is showing us exactly what to target when the time comes. That time came on February 25th, 2025, when the first wave of USB-2 Spirit stealth bombers crossed into Iranian airspace, and the systematic destruction began. The strike pattern reveals a level of operational sophistication that borders on surgical, according to analysis by former U.S. Army missile defense specialist Colin David. These attacks are being executed in carefully sequenced waves. They destroy 2 or 3 targets at a time, David explained in a March 6th interview. After multiple waves, the bases lose their effectiveness due to loss of surface structures and launchers. It's not carpet bombing, it's precision dismantlement. Wave 1 takes out air defense systems. We'll come back to this because it's crucial. Wave 2 collapses primary access tunnels. Wave 3 targets ventilation and power infrastructure. Wave 4 hits secondary exits. By Wave 5, even facilities that haven't suffered direct hits to their main chambers are essentially non-functional because everything they need to operate has been systematically destroyed. And Iran can't respond because of what happened in Wave 1. Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, IDF Chief of Staff, confirmed in a March 4th briefing that approximately 80% of Iran's integrated air defense network has been neutralized. 80%. That means the S-300 systems Iran purchased from Russia, the domestically produced Bavar 373 long-range SAMs, the corded 15 medium-range batteries, nearly all of them are gone or offline. The airspace over Tehran, a capital city that should theoretically be the most defended location in the entire country, is now permeable to U.S. and Israeli aircraft operating with near impunity. This creates what military planners call a freedom of action scenario, and it's every defender's nightmare. With air defenses degraded to this degree, American bombers don't need to rush. They can loiter, they can wait for optimal targeting windows. They can bring in slower surveillance aircraft planes like the RC-135, Rivet Joint, or even MQ-9 Reapers to conduct detailed reconnaissance without meaningful risk. More reconnaissance means better intelligence. Better intelligence means more precise targeting. More precise targeting means higher success rates on subsequent strikes. It's a feedback loop that gets worse for Iran with every passing hour. The Wall Street Journal reported on March 5th that U.S. surveillance aircraft have now identified at least 17 additional underground facilities that weren't on the original target list. 17. Each one represents potentially hundreds more missiles, dozens more launchers, and millions more dollars of Iranian investment that's about to be entombed or destroyed. But let me bring you back to that moment at the beginning. Natanz underground complex. March 3rd, 2:47 a.m. The personnel inside aren't just soldiers. They're technicians, engineers, some of the most specialized military personnel Iran has. You can't train someone to maintain and launch a sophisticated ballistic missile in a few months. It takes years. And when a tunnel collapses, when ventilation systems fail, when power goes out, and emergency generators are buried under rubble, those people don't just become casualties. They become losses that cannot be quickly replaced. Iran's Ministry of Defense hasn't released casualty figures, and they likely never will. But based on the known staffing requirements for facilities of this scale, military analysts estimate that each major underground complex requires between 200 and 400 personnel to operate effectively. If even half of the identified sites have been compromised to the degree that satellite imagery suggests, we're potentially looking at thousands of specialized personnel who are either trapped, killed, or cut off from their operational posts. And unlike missiles, which you can theoretically rebuild given enough time and resources, human expertise is irreplaceable in the short to medium term. This brings us to the final domino, and it's the one that should terrify Iranian military planners more than anything else.